in some of the statements I've read, like an air of arrogance or control about you where you just think possibly you're better than everyone else and you're untouchable. Is that what it is?
No comment.
And that you weren't going to get found out?
No comment. No comment. No comment.
You do not have to speak, but if you fail to mention facts now that you rely on later in court, it could damage your defense. Anything you do, say, can be used against you. Is greater than. This nightmare unfolded across the United Kingdom for years. Enter Neil Frederick Foden. Born in August 1957, he was a man in his 60s while this saga played out. Foden spent over 30 years in the Welsh school system. Starting in 1988, as an English teacher, he climbed the ladder fast. By 1997, he was the headmaster of a massive secondary school in North Wales. He became a heavyweight in the local education scene. The man was famous for his loud opinions and was a regular fixture in the press. Reporters and politicians hung on his every word regarding funding and policy. He was a trusted voice. But over time, that high profile morphed into a dangerous kind of influence. Behind closed doors, he was a tyrant. Staff said he hijacked meetings and seized power that was supposed to be shared with the board. He built a regime where he held all the cards. He did this by weaponizing temporary contracts and public shaming to maintain a grip of terror. He ruled by fear. Employees later confessed they were terrified that one wrong word would leave them unemployed. Even parents stayed silent, afraid their kids would get kicked out of school. There were cracks in the armor. A tribunal once nailed him for bullying a teacher, slapping a 2-year warning on his file. But that slap on the wrist changed nothing. He kept teaching. He kept running the show. That bullying charge came because he was cooking the books on exam scores to boost the school's image. A teacher caught him, blew the whistle, and filed a report. That whistleblower went through hell. For 4 years, Foden tormented him, and when investigators came knocking, Foden rallied the troops. Nearly the entire staff signed a letter backing him. Sure, some signed out of sheer panic, afraid they would be next, but others? They were genuine loyalists. A toxic fan club, that silence, that refusal to push back paved the way for monstrosities. The turning point hit in 2018. The deputy head, the safeguarding lead, passed away. Foden seized the moment. He appointed himself the guardian of child protection. 0 qualifications, 0 experience, and nobody had the guts to stop him. Now, the predator had the keys to the castle, absolute authority over the most at-risk kids. If a student was hurting, he was there to prey on them. You can see exactly where this is heading. Then, Foden hit the national headlines, but not for abuse, for cruelty. He ordered that any kid owing just 2 pence for lunch should go hungry. The UK exploded in outrage. Even football star Marcus Rashford condemned him. But that public scandal was nothing compared to the horrors unfolding in the shadows. Before we go deeper, listen closely. A review later proved the red flags were there since early 2018, 50 distinct chances to catch this monster. 50 missed opportunities. Staff caught him texting a student late at night. That same girl was found sleeping in his office, head resting on his desk. Around then, witnesses saw him walking a girl to his car on school grounds. Police were called. His excuse? Just giving her a ride home. Neither student was questioned. Case closed. Remember, he made himself the safeguarding boss, so any complaint about Foden went straight to Foden. A fox guarding the henhouse. A massive conflict of interest that everyone ignored. He started holding private support meetings. Alone, off-site, or in his office. Staff later revealed he would keep the lights off and the blinds drawn. His excuse? Confidentiality. In 2019, he was seen taking a student to police and doctor visits without parents knowing. Senior staff flagged the boundary issues, but nobody wrote it down. No paper trail was ever made. By 2020, outside agencies rang the alarm. Referrals flooded in, but every single one was tossed out, claimed not to meet the threshold, for an investigation. During the national lockdown, he kept 2 students on campus without permission. His deputies discussed it, felt sick about it, but were too terrified to act. In 2021, he actually got promoted. He took an executive role at a new school. The complaints followed him: inappropriate restraint, creepy contact with a female student. By early 2022, it was an open secret. Everyone knew he was isolating vulnerable girls. March 2023, his team finally wrote him up: keep the door open, blinds up. He completely ignored them. Summer 2023, a social worker reported him for hugging a student. That file bounced around for 9 weeks. 9 weeks of inaction while he kept meeting kids in secret. The system failed at every single turn. If just one person had dug a little deeper, the whole house of cards would have collapsed. A true scandal was waiting to be found. Finally, on the 6th of September, 2023, the dam broke. A student told staff she was dating Foden. She had the texts. She had the photos. This time, the police could not look the other way. It begins with victim A. 2 quick notes before we proceed. First, names are hidden. These victims were minors, protected for life by British law. Second, brace yourself. This gets dark. Victim A arrived at Foden's school in 2017, already vulnerable. Authorities had a safety plan for her. It was supposed to keep her safe during school hours. Instead, it led her to him. The mandate was strict: female chaperones only. Yet come January 2019, a situation with victim A and the authorities demanded a guardian present. It should have been a parent or a vetted female staffer, but Neil stepped in to escort her himself. For a principal, managing a student body of 1,400, this was bizarre and a direct breach of the safety protocols. During that same incident, Neil slipped victim A his private email to establish a direct line. He let their chats drift far past the original issue, often ignoring her for days to manufacture a dependency on his validation. That is classic grooming. Neil next drove victim A to see a general practitioner, followed by a trip to a sexual assault crisis center. He started holding solo meetings under the guise of counseling. He even took her to a gynecologist. Not once did her parents know about, let alone consent to, these excursions. The medical letters were even sent to him, treating him like her legal guardian. Other staff picked up on the toxic attachment forming with the at-risk girl and logged numerous red flags within the school. He would sequester himself with her in his office for hours. Witnesses later recalled her resting her, head on his shoulder. They were seen holding hands, and he was her personal taxi for appointments. Eventually, she got his private cell number. Teachers urged him to distance himself, but he ignored them. He began picking her up from her house for drives late at night. He told her mother they were off to a cake. The pastry workshops wrapped up by 9:30 at night, but suspicion was already brewing. Reportedly, Neil and the woman known as Victim A initially laughed off the rumors, joking about how their closeness might appear to the outside world. But the dynamic quickly turned dark. They took their communication to private messaging apps, where he commanded her to wipe their chat history. Digital forensics and witness statements later confirmed that the abuse ramped up severely. During car rides, Neil would coerce her into performing He commanded her to proceed. Neil harbored a twisted, lifelong fixation on bodily fluids. Once he had his victims trapped in the vehicle, he would coerce them into consuming massive quantities of water. Then, he forced them to compress their bladders until they involuntarily relieved themselves for his gratification. The specific details of the act were never released, but digital evidence later revealed his threats: tell absolutely no one, intending to carry that secret to the grave. Yet, her browser history left a chilling trail, featuring searches on signs an older man is attracted to you or am I being groomed, alongside inquiries regarding jail terms for sexual assault. Deep down, Victim A sensed the danger. She realized she was being preyed upon. But she was already entangled, and she was just a child. And so the exploitation persisted. Future investigations would uncover a grim reality. Victim A wasn't the only student suffering. Another highly susceptible girl caught in Neil's web was Victim C. By early 2018, records proved he was blasting messages to her private email well past midnight. Furthermore, faculty observed her constantly hanging around his workspace, once even finding her asleep with her head resting on his desk. Then, on July 9, 2018, a classmate reported spotting him. He was observed accompanying a female student who eventually stepped into his ride. The school verified her identity as victim C, and the tragic pattern leaves little doubt about the nightmare awaiting anyone who entered that vehicle. Investigators interrogated him, but they swallowed his excuse about giving her a ride home hook, line, and sinker. They never even spoke to the student, so once again, no further. Steps were taken. Not even 2 weeks later, on July 24th, 2018, the director of the care home housing victim C alerted police and social services that Neil was constantly isolating the child after school. Yet again, the agencies sat on their hands, marking down another SATB's critical failure in the files. It is staggering to realize that while this was happening, red flags were already being raised regarding victim A. Simultaneously, during the lockdowns of April 2020, he was caught bringing victim A and victim C into the school building without permission to teach them in private. We also need to discuss victim E. She was actually the second accuser to speak up when this house of cards finally came crashing down. Neil referred to her as his personal plaything and demanded she call him Mr. P. He claimed it stood for perfect, rather than the slang term for a predator. The man was a monster. He would drive victim E around in his vehicle, claiming they were scouting hiking trails in the countryside. Or at least, that was his cover story. The reality was that he was taking victim E from school and driving to secluded areas to assault her. She later revealed that during these attacks, he would violently squeeze her throat. Disturbingly, around this same time, Neil traveled to a convention to speak on a panel for children's education and welfare. But the very night before his presentation, he brought victim E to his hotel room and attacked her. Victim B was yet another young, impressionable target who fell prey to that exact same playbook. Neil labeled these private meetings as therapy, a twisted justification for the abuse. Victim B recounted a terrifying moment where he pinned her by the throat while forcing unwanted physical contact along her legs. Then there is victim F, whose testimony appeared in the internal review rather than the criminal trial. He engineered a deep emotional dependency, making her believe he was her sanctuary. The grooming involved domestic gestures, cooking for her, brewing tea, and isolating her within the confines of his office repeatedly. Neil manufactured a sense of exclusivity, convincing her that she was unique and that they shared a special bond. Victim F described him as incredibly attentive, always available to hear her out. However, those sessions often escalated to physical embraces that completely shattered professional boundaries. Neil completely disregarded the personal and legal boundaries of victim F. She never consented to these embraces. They were a calculated maneuver in his playbook. He used them to break the physical barrier, a stepping stone, before escalating to more severe abuse. It was a way to test the waters, seeing exactly how far he could overstep. Victim G suffered through this as well. On one specific occasion, he trapped her in a hug, pinning her arms firmly to her sides so she was completely immobilized. That alone is suffocating, but what makes it truly skin-crawling is the duration. He refused to let go, holding her in that grip for more than 5 long minutes. As you can expect, victim G was left petrified. Tragically, when these incidents were reported, nobody listened. She made it her mission to stay as far away from him as possible. Overhead costs. Eventually, Neil insisted she report to his workspace. When she balked, he laid hands on her, dragging her inside against her will. She was startlingly young. The truth of what transpired behind those closed doors remains a total mystery. As the details were completely excluded from the official court records, it is entirely possible she simply refused to relive the trauma by speaking about it. Then, in May of, fast forward to 2020, another student, identified as Victim S, raised the alarm regarding Neil's inappropriate physical boundaries. She reported the incidents to 2 separate faculty members who promised to address the matter with Foden directly, yet the follow-through was virtually non-existent. It appeared the man was untouchable, operating with total impunity. We have only touched upon a handful of casualties here, but the alphabetized list of victims extends all the way to S. That means at least 19 students endured abuse they never should have suffered. It was inevitable that his house of cards would eventually collapse. On the morning of September 6, 2023, Victim A finally broke her silence, revealing a clandestine relationship with Neil Foden. She provided the pastoral staff with undeniable proof in the form of photographs and WhatsApp logs. The digital trail was explicitly sexual, pointing to a multitude of serious crimes. By 10:45 that morning, law enforcement was notified. Victim A was so terrified of retribution that she barricaded herself inside a supply closet. Her fears were well-founded. Foden sensed the walls closing in and began hunting for the girl. In a frantic attempt to cover his tracks, he purged 17 graphic images sent by Victim A from his device. But the digital footprint was indelible. North Wales police moved in, arresting Foden and launching a full criminal probe. The body cam footage captures the moment. Mr. Foden, I am arresting you on suspicion of sexual touching of a child and illicit communication with a minor, the officer continued. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not. Mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. With Foden in custody, Victim A opened the floodgates. Investigators raided Foden's residence and office, seizing electronics that proved to be a goldmine of data. The arrest triggered a domino effect. Other students stepped forward, victims E, B, C, and numerous others. Detectives meticulously charted the communications, revealing a predatory blueprint of grooming and escalation. Foden remained stonewall silent during interrogation, offering only no-comment responses. Yet the evidence spoke volumes. Within 48 hours, he was formally charged and denied bail. He entered a plea of not guilty, setting the stage for a showdown at Mold Crown Court on April 22, 2024. Both sides began their arguments. The prosecution painted a chilling picture of a man weaponizing his authority to target students. They outlined a specific modus operandi: innocuous chats that morphed into sexual propositions, clandestine meetups, and strict demands for secrecy. Every allegation was corroborated by phone pings, transit records, and academic schedules. One student had even maintained a meticulous log, sensing the inherent wrongness of the situation. These courageous young women took the stand to narrate their trauma. The defense, however, mounted a vigorous counterattack, imploring the jury to question the reliability of adolescent recollections and the interpretation of the messages. They argued there was a lack of hard forensic evidence and claimed Foden's standard administrative actions were being twisted into something nefarious. Neil denied. Every accusation asserting his behavior was strictly professional and the claims fabricated. But over 16 days, the mountain of testimony became insurmountable. On May 15, 2024, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on 19 counts, including 12 instances of sexual offenses against a minor. He was also convicted of possessing illicit imagery of the victims. Judgment Day arrived on July 1, 2024. The court handed down a 17-year sentence, mandating he serve at least 2/3 before parole eligibility. The judge didn't mince words, condemning Foden for preying on vulnerable girls with arrogant entitlement and displaying zero contrition for the devastation he wrought. Authorities subsequently confirmed he has been permanently stripped of his teaching credentials. Some might argue that justice has been served. But critics point to a systemic failure, suggesting the corruption and negligence run deep within the education sector, child protective services, and even law enforcement. The Foden file stands as one of the most maddening examples of institutional failure in recent memory. The victim count skyrocketed, simply because silence was the status quo. It is bone-chilling to realize a predator like Foden could climb the professional ladder and operate unchecked. For so long, there were 50 distinct chances to intervene, and every single one was missed.